Great. Thank you so much. Thanks to the Principal Solar Institute for having me, and thank you all for joining today to talk about solar in Texas. Always excited to do it. Really just want to give you a high-level overview of where we're at, what we're up to, and what's coming. So let's begin. Just give you a sense of what I had in mind. I want to introduce TSPA, Texas Solar Power Association, as a new group, kind of set some context with what's going on nationally with solar and how it affects Texas. Get into why solar is such a good idea for the state of Texas. Bring you up to speed on some recent market activity here at wholesale and retail levels, and then talk a little bit about some of the issues and priorities that we're working on right now going forward. And at some point answer the question about 2015 for you, though I may let you make your own decision on that. Just a little bit about us. The Texas Solar Power Association got started this past year, 2014. We're a statewide industry trade association promoting solar at all scales in Texas. Our members are investing here in the state, both at wholesale and retail levels, and our membership is really comprised of the full breadth of the solar industry, from global leaders in manufacturing and large-scale power plant development down to distributors, rooftop commercial and residential integrators, and really the full supply chain of the industry we want to represent. And we really want to be a resource for policymakers, for other stakeholders, and for the industry here in the state. Taking a look at our membership, we have a number of companies, like I said, really spanning the full range of what the solar industry is up to right now. Some, again, based here in the state, some with a global presence, but all investing here in the state of Texas, which is exciting to see. So this is solar. I have a sense that you are all familiar with solar. I'm not going to go into details about technology or the basics, but it's important, I think, for everyone to see that solar is happening here in the state of Texas, that this is not just a concept, not just an idea. We have significant solar on the ground, and we're making a contribution. And in lieu of taking you all on tours and really showing you everything that's going on, I like to pepper my talks with photos so you can at least kind of get a sense of where we are in the state. So every photo here will be of installations actually on the ground in the state of Texas, which is exciting to see. So just looking nationally at where we are, I'm not going to go super in depth, but we're up over 16 gigawatts of installed solar here in the United States, and we just had our second best quarter ever in Q3 of last year, really growing quickly. Expected to see 6.5 gigawatts through 2014, really significant growth. And the Solar Foundation Solar Census was recently released, showing we have over 174,000 workers. More than 20% growth. So again, it's a tremendous growth story nationally, and that's really setting the context of what we're doing here in the state of Texas. Solar is growing quickly. Putting the numbers in context with the other resource types, just in the past couple of years, solar is making an increase in contribution to new capacity. So just from 10% of new additions in 2012 up to 36% in the first 3 quarters of last year, solar is becoming an increasing part of new generation, which is exciting to see. And again, we're a real contribution. We're moving beyond the hypothetical. We are present in the energy industry, and that is fantastic. Looking at kind of why that is, and I'll get more into prices and some cost issues in a little bit, but the trend on cost is excellent. One of the reasons why we're making such a big contribution is because we are cost competitive in a lot of ways, in a lot of places, including here in the state of Texas. And looking at actual contract prices over the past couple of years, very strong trend line down. We are heading in the right direction. We're seeing more projects at bigger scales and cost competitive. And so that is one of the key reasons why we're seeing so much growth. And again, I like to highlight who it is that's buying the solar. And so on the previous chart about PPAs, a lot of that is large utility scale projects. But on the commercial and residential side, here showing commercial, who is it that's buying these systems? They're mainstream companies, mainstream brands. These are not one-off, nice-to-do greenwashing type activities. major businesses and corporations in this country are making the choice to do solar because it meets their financial needs and it meets the goals and visions of their companies. And this is one of the reasons why it's happening in Texas and will continue to happen in Texas. All of these companies have a presence here. And so as they begin to integrate solar into their portfolios, those lessons are going to disseminate throughout the country and here in the state of Texas. And so it's always important to show how solar is crossing into the mainstream and is no longer just a nice to do niche kind of activity. It's something that every serious business is starting to take a look at, and the ones who are doing the analysis are finding that it's a great deal and worth doing. More shots of installations actually here. This is the San Antonio area commercial installation and the Blue Wing utility scale plant happening. Very exciting stuff. So kind of digging here into Texas, given all that great national development and national growth, where are we? You know, as confident as we are and as fantastic as the state of Texas is, we're not meeting our total potential. We have some ways to go. You know, hovering 8th, 9th in the past couple of years in terms of installed capacity relative to other states. You know, down around in the 11, 14 range in the first couple of quarters, got up to ranked 5th in the last quarter. So that's a bonus, but you know, hovering behind the other large, more developed markets. The reality of the prevailing attitudes towards solar here in the state among political leadership is that it's fairly ambivalent. Solar is not vocally supported statewide, and unfortunately is viewed skeptically by many, and that's something that we're working very diligently to change. Solar has been painted, unfortunately, oftentimes with a brush that just doesn't fit the reality of what it is for the state of Texas and what it is as an industry. And so a lot of our efforts are to overcome that, but that's the reality of the conversation that exists here. From a policy perspective, the state of Texas does not have a statewide net metering program, a statewide incentive, or an active renewable portfolio standard or other mandate that would create a market for solar by policy. Which is, you know, something that many other states have done to reach some of the higher levels that they've seen. But the upside that we have is a very general pro-business orientation. We support industry, we support energy development, we support investment. These are all good things and reasons why Texas is a good place for solar, and I'll get more into that in a sec. We also have third-party ownership allowed statewide. Some states have not yet allowed that, and so that's a very positive thing for the solar industry. And a generally positive environment. It's just a matter of not having a significant statewide policy that's creating a market. And the reality is that Texas is unique. It's a complex space, and I'll kind of describe a little bit more what I mean by that. You all know that Texas is a little bit different. We like to consider ourselves a bit of our own country in a good way, I think. We have our own grid managed by ERCOT that meets most of the state's electricity load, and so that gives us some more leeway than other places to manage our portfolio and our solar activity here. But in addition to that one singular grid footprint, we have a fairly complex regulatory environment, and it's just important that everybody understands that when you think about solar taking off, especially in lieu of a particular statewide policy for solar. We have the major, that area in blue, the major ERCOT space that is managed by ERCOT in a competitive way, which means there's customer choice on their retail provider. Within that space, you have a number of municipal and co-op public power utilities which are still vertically integrated. And then the areas outside of ERCOT, to the west, El Paso Electric, and the north, and in the east, you have Entergy, Southwest Public Service, SWEPCO. So you have these other providers that are vertically integrated. So the state of Texas is a mix of environments, which does make it more challenging if you are looking to expand solar activities, because there are many different places that you have to integrate. But it's the ERCOT region is still the largest, and within that, many opportunities. Looking at where we are, this is just a snapshot of Texas's current generation and energy use from the past year. the reality is that we're still just a tiny, tiny fraction of the total mix. I joke that one of our first goals is to have our own wedge of the pie that's just named solar, that isn't the other wedge, isn't combined with others to try to meet 1%. So we are starting from a very small piece of the pie, but the pie as a whole is growing, our load is growing, our energy use is growing, and solar's contribution is growing. So I want to talk a little bit about why we think there's room for growth. So I apologize if I do a little preaching to the choir, bear with me. I think many of the folks on this call are familiar with solar, but it's important just to reiterate the fundamental case for why we're doing this here in the state and why it's such a good match. Texas has a number of needs and attributes from, like I mentioned, our growing demand. We have needs for peak power. We have an acknowledged sustained drought and need for water savings. We have air quality constraints in municipal areas, and we have more sun than any other state. We have the biggest resource around, as well as the largest electricity market, the biggest grid, and people generally support solar. Those are positive attributes that the state of Texas has, and if you just look at the specifics of what solar power offers, we can meet those needs and effectively, cost competitively, with good supply, no water requirements. We can deploy very quickly. It's tremendous investment. It doesn't emit. There's a number of reasons that just looking at the merit, solar is a good fit for the state of Texas. It's a match. Digging into a few of those points, we would be remiss if we didn't again highlight we have so much sun. Everyone acknowledges who lives here and throughout that it's sunny in Texas. We're big. We have a lot of land. We have a lot of space. And our solar resource, especially out west, is as strong as anywhere. And looking at just the numbers of what that looks like, NREL has done analyses on the technical potential of solar. If we were to capture all of the sun that fell in an area that it could be captured, so not bodies of water, under shade, or protected areas or national parks, if you just look at the available land on rooftop and urban and rural utility scale land, we have just gigawatts and gigawatts and gigawatts of potential. It's more than you could ever need. So we're not certainly proposing to capture all of that, half of that, even 10% of that. We're not going to absolutely cover the entire state, but it is a tremendous resource that we have. And just putting some of the numbers in context, 20,000 gigawatts of rural utility scale capacity potential, and our entire ERCOT peak capacity is only 74 gigawatts. So the top line is tremendous. Looking at kind of what solar does for you, come back to cost competitive. It's the number one thing that's important right now, in terms of solar's uptake and at large scale and retail. What does it cost? It's cost competitive. It's a good thing. Looking at when it produces on peak, and I'll talk a little bit about that more in a bit. It's scalable. It's inherently modular, as you all know, so you can do it from just a single kilowatt all the way up to multi-megawatt on a rooftop, big hundreds of megawatts in bigger areas kind of as you need it. It doesn't emit, no fuel costs, which means you can hedge long-term on your energy prices, and it requires no water. These are important things that are not necessarily always, that don't necessarily come out just looking at a cent per kilowatt hour or dollars per megawatt hour calculation. It has characteristics that are important, especially if you are managing a portfolio of energy assets. Looking at that peak in a little bit more detail, looking ERCOT-wide at where and when our peaking happens, there's just a couple of single days that are highlighted here. One kind of a mild, typical day in March when we hit 31,000 megawatts here in the ERCOT region, and then looking at another day over the summer. It gets very hot here in Texas over the summer, and that's what drives our peak. And so on a very hot day in August, 68,000 megawatts. And what's driving that? Those residential AC units. And so when you're looking at what's driving the peak, it's largely the sun, which means that solar power would be producing a lot. So there's a natural fit there with why you might want to meet this large peak need with solar power because we naturally drive it. And that's important to take into consideration. Looking, specifically at the different areas, a lot of times people ask me, so is solar going to be just a rooftop thing, or is this something that, just a power plant thing, and as if it's one or the other? And the answer is both. The answer is we are going to have solar at multiple scales because there are specific benefits at each scale. On the retail side for residential and commercial, you have customer choice, and you have taking control of your electricity bills, self-generating, making a contribution to energy independence, and just having more control over what's going on with you with electricity in terms of your bills, in terms of future cost, in terms of earning a financial return. It's a quality investment for you as a homeowner or as a business. In terms of distributed, it puts generation right where you need it, which can help with grid line losses, congestion issues, potentially slowing the need for future investment. So very particular benefits that you get from siting solar on rooftops or in an urban environment closer to where the customers are and where the loads are. At big scale with power plants, you get economies of scale benefit. You can site where the solar resource is the strongest and really optimize that. We're rapidly deployable, and this is an important benefit relative maybe to some other power plant choices. It doesn't take as long to develop a solar plant as other plants, and so if you're trying to track load growth, if you can deliver a plant in 2, 3, 4 years instead of 7, 8, 9 years, you'll have much better alignment with that load, with cost, deliver with certainty. That's a real benefit. We've made some good investments in transmission here in the state of Texas, and solar, because it's a peaking daytime resource, really maximizes the use of that infrastructure and works well with the other generating resources such as wind that are producing at different times. And, of interest to many people, it has minimal viewshed impact. And so if you look across the horizon, you're probably not going to be able to see solar plants. And so if that's of concern to you in terms of the large-scale aesthetics, certainly solar is a little more hidden. So looking at the various markets, solar has a huge role to play, and why I think it's going to make a difference here in the state. More photos of exactly what's going on. This is here in the Austin area, and again in the Alamo solar project. So big scale, small scale, solar is happening. Digging a little bit further into what's specifically going on here in the state of Texas, looking first at the retail side. Like I said, we are not #1 in the country, I'm sad to say, in terms of residential and commercial solar, but that's okay. We're coming on strong. We've got about 40 megawatts of residential and 35 megawatts of commercial through the last quarter that we have data from the Solar Energy Industries Association. There are a number of programs covering specific markets that have been really driving that activity and have been here in the state kind of the traditional leaders of the solar that we do have. In the San Antonio area, CPS Energy; in the Austin area, Austin Energy City of Austin; in the Dallas area, Encore; and a number of other municipal and co-op utilities have established efforts to promote and facilitate solar by their customers. And so CPS, Austin Energy, and the munis and co-ops are public power entities that serve their particular owner, members, and residents. And they've seen value in promoting local economic development and customer-focused solar, and those have been the leaders and where a lot of the activity has come. Starting to grow more into the competitive market, so outside of those muni and co-op areas within ERCOT, there is customer choice. And so the whole Houston area and areas throughout the state, customers choose their retail electric provider, and that's an option that they have to look at specific tariff options that they have in terms of purchasing electricity and installing solar themselves. Starting to get into some of those markets, it is a more challenging area, no doubt, because of, again, the lack of statewide policy, that kind of direct solar, and because every retail provider can offer their own solar customer generation provisions, and so some do offer kind of net metering type provisions, others offer to buy back customer generation at avoided cost or other rates, and so there's some shopping that has to happen there. But I think that's going to be a positive thing, because as we see it, solar is quickly becoming something that retail providers will want to offer as a rationale for customers signing up with them. So our approach is not to make the retail providers do anything in particular, but to show that solar can be a good selling point. If you're a retail provider, customer retention is an incredibly important thing to you, because if I'm going to shop for my provider and your competitor offers a little bit cheaper of a rate, what's going to keep me from just jumping over there? Possibly an attractive solar program that you offer that keeps me interested in what you're offering. And so I think that's something that we're going to see a lot more of. And certainly with solar, because it's modular, because it's self-generation, obviously, there will always be kind of off-grid special applications that solar can empower, and that's always a good thing. So we'll see that continue to take off. One specific positive here in the state of Texas on the retail side, our prices are lower than most of the state. According to Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and their annual Tracking the Sun reports that they do, we're the second cheapest among states, and Florida almost doesn't count because they have a really small sample size there with only 19 systems that they looked at. But largely because of our generally low electricity prices, our very good and established programs through CPS, through Austin Energy, through Encore that have really spurred good competition, and because of customer choice and customers starting to choose and getting comfortable with that searching process, it's just led to the industry delivering at lower prices. And so that's a positive benefit here for the state of Texas. Looking now at the wholesale large-scale power plant space, I've been showing some photos. We have plants on the ground here, a number throughout the state. Again, sometimes driven by CPS and some of their programs in San Antonio, Austin Energy and some of the procurements that they've made, and continued procurements that they're making. Over 650 megawatts either built or under construction or under contract. So it's a significant footprint. I think that's more than double what we currently have on the ground right now, of about 300 megawatts total in the state, and some nice things coming and underway. So looking kind of why we're bullish, why is the trajectory moving forward for us? I've been talking about cost competitiveness. This is a chart that we show here is where we are, taking the cost of new generation from EIA's data and showing what West Texas utility scale PV would cost using the published prices and costs of solar from the Solar Energy Industries Association. We're able to create solar electricity at a cost that's competitive, the lowest cost peaking resource available. So forgetting about all of those other characteristics and any other benefit you see with doing solar, if you're just cost shopping, solar makes sense. And a couple of things that have really teed that up in the past year that I think have gotten a lot of interest in the state of Texas. Recurrence deal with Austin Energy, which was announced in 2014, 150 megawatt deal. The pricing associated with that really made national and to some extent international headlines, and taking our tremendous solar resource, the maturity of the industry, our positive development environment, able to deliver a project that is just incredibly cost competitive. And admittedly, from the general manager of Austin Energy, Larry, we said, solar is competitive in the ERCOT market. This is real, and we're taking it up, and it's a good deal for our constituents, for our residents, to add solar to the portfolio. And I love what their spokesman said. The reality when they went out with that RFP, it was only for 50 megawatts, but when they got the specifics of what was on offer in the state of the market, they decided to triple what they took on. So they chose to contract for 150 megawatts because the prices were so good. And I think that's going to be what you're seeing more and what started to turn some heads. Another milestone project that happened in this past year that really got a lot of positive attention was the Berea Solar 1 project from First Solar out in Fort Stockton. There's a little map cutaway there out in West Texas. The reason that this was a milestone was that it was built on an open contract basis, usually known as a merchant project, which means that they did not have an off-taker for the power. There was no long-term power purchase agreement in place, which is what all solar plants to date have required to get financing for the project. So as you all know, the thing with solar, the fuel is free. Nearly all of the cost is building the project up front and the equipment and the initial financing. And so you've tended to need a long-term off-taker for the power and a long-term contract to get that plant financed. First Solar was confident of just selling their power into the ERCOT market and just compete just like other natural gas plants, coal plants, nuclear plants, wind plants, how everybody does here in the state of Texas. So that was exciting. That went online in September, and really I think is another milestone, the first in the country that we're aware of that has done that. And we may see more projects like that, but really a signal that solar is competitive. And this is a shot of that project out there. Because of those things, the cost, those new market developments, what we saw in 2014 was really an expansion of interest. From municipal and co-op utilities like Georgetown, but also from investor-owned utilities like Xcel, Southwestern Public Service, real interest in adding solar to their portfolio. And again, not just because of an environmental benefit or a compliance mandate, which there isn't one, but just because when you look at entities that manage portfolios, adding solar as a wedge of their pie makes real economic sense, and the pricing where it is became very attractive. And so we saw a number of RFPs come out in 2014. I think that's going to continue as more municipal and co-op utilities see the exciting activity as these projects get announced, get built. It's gonna happen even more. And it is happening from a development perspective. So looking at the queue of interconnection, so before any large-scale generation resource is brought online, ERCOT requires them to go through a number of screening studies and scoping studies to make sure that they can safely and effectively interconnect to the ERCOT grid. And so before projects are built, we have a sense of what is in the pipeline. And the number and size of projects in the pipeline for solar has been growing tremendously, and there's now over 6 gigawatts of projects in development, 6,000 megawatts. And these are projects that have invested real capital to do the studies necessary, to get land, to go through the development process. Now, we don't expect all of these projects to necessarily come to fruition. Many of them will need to get financing. Some may choose not to move forward for this, one reason or another, but it's a tremendous number. This is 20 times what we have installed right now, expected to, targeting the next 2 years to come online, 2015, 2016. So it's a tremendous indicator of the amount of market interest that there is and real development activity that's going on. And looking, even one step further, this is not even on the development side. This is ERCOT, a completely, obviously, objective broker for electricity here in the state of Texas. They do a regular assessment of transmission needs called the long-term system assessment, and they did a number of scenarios looking at, given all the costs of various generating resources, what do we think is going to happen so we can plan effectively? And they ran a number of scenarios. This is just the current trends scenario, just looking at business as usual. Here is what we think is going to happen if there's no new policy, no new cataclysmic anything with regulation or any other things. Just looking at business as usual, ERCOT is projecting now over 10 gigawatts of solar to come online by 2029. And this does not include distributed generation, rooftop, commercial, and residential. This is just large plants. So even they are acknowledging that solar's costs have come down to the point where it is going to make sense for generators to bring solar online and for municipal and co-op utilities to bring solar into their portfolios. Very exciting to see. Again, I can't stress this enough. This is business as usual. This is not if the state of Texas passes this policy or if the federal government does this, then maybe we can do these things with solar. This is what we expect to see happen. So it's very exciting here in the state of Texas, and the CEO of ERCOT, Trip Doggett, pointed this out at a recent Senate Natural Resources hearing because it was so, this is in kind of just numbers form, but he had a visual of this in a stacked bar chart, and the way that solar is growing, it kind of sticks out as a new addition over a number of years. And he pointed that out. He made a point to highlight for the senators that that this was a new wedge that was there to make a contribution, and he acknowledged this is something we haven't had before. This is a resource that's will be available to Texas that hasn't been online before, and really will play a role and be a positive addition as others are concerned about other resources maybe coming offline for one reason or another. Solar will be there to supplement. So that's exciting to see. And here it is, rooftop, large plants happening all over. So now just, given all that context, a lot of good activity in the state, a lot of good activity nationally. Where are we looking in terms of our priorities and making sure that happens? First off, just from a market perspective, what are the issues that we're looking at? Number one, I've kind of referred to it a little bit. Power is generally pretty cheap in the state of Texas. Retail prices are a little below average. Our competitive market has very low power, and it's really a challenge for all generators. So when you're talking about building new generation, either for retail or for large-scale power plants, it's a challenge for everyone. The state of Texas has actually had regulatory activities going on for a number of years looking at, do we have an adequate reserve margin? Will new generation be built? Are prices in the market sufficient to encourage enough new generation to come online? And so solar's right there with everyone else, as it's a challenging environment when prices are and costs are so low in the competitive market. I mentioned that 6 gigawatt of projects in the pipeline, just making sure that those get built, they find off-takers. We see more RFPs coming out from entities that want to procure. I think doing that matchmaking is something that we'll take a look at. Real education process is high on our list. Solar's costs have come down quickly and dramatically, and it is clear that if you're not paying attention, and if you're not in this industry, why would you? If you're just a kind of a disinterested stakeholder or a policymaker that has 100 other things to worry about, you might not have heard that solar is cost competitive. You might not have seen that solar's market is really taking off. And so we're spending a lot of time just making sure that everybody has the latest and greatest information, both from a policy perspective, but also just customers, just that customers on the retail and commercial side see, here's where solar is. You might have looked at it 5 years ago and thought it was not ready. Take another look. And I point out financing too. That's an area that's evolving very rapidly, and continue to see innovation, giving customers an opportunity to take advantage of the underlying positive economics of going solar in a way that actually meets their financing capability. And, I mentioned the competitive market. That's really the next big area. I think there's going to continue to be good growth in the municipal and co-op space, a lot of good peer-to-peer sharing, and people will learn from each other on what works in that space. The competitive market obviously is competitive, and customers get to choose. And so working more into that space and having customers get brought up to speed on solar and seeing models and growth happening in that area is a big one. Looking at the regulatory side, I'm not going to go through all of these in detail. The Public Utility Commission has been very active in the past year on projects that affect solar. Some of these projects are specific to solar or renewable energy in general. Others, like the review of the reliability standard, the EPA rule, resource adequacy, really just get to the design and structure of the Texas power market. And solar is a participant in that market, and so we are at the table to make sure that solar is well represented and that our interests are acknowledged and not discriminated against. So we participated with each of these projects either in workshops or in written stakeholder comments, just making sure that folks understand where solar is, what our needs are, and it's been very positive. We've actually seen a good response from staff and from other stakeholders on letting solar participate in the market and not changing the rules to inhibit solar in any way. I think there's a acknowledgement that competition is a good thing. And so it's nice to see Donna Nelson, the chairman of the Public Utility Commission, acknowledge that, you know, solar is a mature industry and ready to participate. And so we are doing that. Happy to follow up on any of those necessary. Those are down in the weeds issues at times, but really critical for the industry to make sure that we are engaged and participating. So again, that we don't see any discrimination against solar as a technology or as an industry. And finally, legislative. As hopefully you all know, here in the state of Texas, we meet as a legislature every 2 years, and we are in session now. So we have a session going through the end of May. Our primary ask of legislators, other than just, you know, providing education, is really do no harm. So we are not really specifically asking for new mandates or incentives. We support the competitive market. All of that growth that I've talked about and customer choice we think is positive, and we just want to see that happen. You know, we want to see legislators support the solar energy industry as the energy industry, not necessarily with a mandate or an incentive, but just that it is a viable, valuable contribution here in the state. So let it work. Don't tax us, don't add new fees, don't create barriers, don't inhibit that choice and that growth. Specifically on the regulatory side, make sure that the Public Utility Commission and ERCOT have flexibility to implement the rules that they have and the markets that they administer, and don't, you know, tie the hands of the state with regard to federal rules or other rules. Let them work it out. There's quality stakeholder processes that are in play there, and we want to see that happen. Chapter 313 is an economic development program at the local level that is not just for solar. It is a industrial investment program. Want to make sure that solar maintains eligibility to participate in that. Very valuable investments committed to so far, and really a valuable contribution that those plants are going to make. Let's make sure that that happens. We'll always keep an eye out for any barriers that we see in the market and among our companies, and look to work with various stakeholders to overcome those. What I want to convey to the legislature is that if we come to you with a policy request, it is because these are barriers that we are facing in delivering power to customers. And we're going to come to you with some win-win solutions on how to overcome these in a way that works for customers, that works for taxpayers and others in a collaborative way. And so we're not going to invent whole new policies. We're going to have it be very tangible and based on our experience. So we're always on the lookout for that, looking at large-scale development and what property owners associations are doing and homeowners associations, make sure that there's good access, working with the home builders and developers on that front, looking at processes with paperwork. It's a variety of things, but wanting to make sure that solar works effectively. And finally, just kind of looking towards the future, one big issue, obviously, that has been in the dialogue within the state are EPA regulations around carbon, around haze, around other emissions aspects. EPA 111D with the Clean Power Plan has gotten a lot of conversation, and the required response that the state of Texas will need to have towards that. Our message there is really that solar is going to be a part of the solution and a pro-investment part of the solution. That, again, we're hoping that the legislature doesn't tie the hands of the Public Utility Commission or the TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, to do what's necessary to provide regulatory certainty. We are an energy industry, and an industry just like any other, and we want to make sure that what is enacted by the state is positive for development at all scales and isn't fraught with too much uncertainty. Just looking at the particulars of what the EPA has requested of Texas I mentioned the 10 gigawatts of solar in the pipeline, combine that with the wind that's planned to come online, and to our analysis, there is no need for a new mandate for solar or renewable energy to meet the specs that the EPA has carved out. Just business as usual growth is gonna meet that, and so we just want to make sure that solar and the state are given credit for those contributions. So again, we think that solar is going to be a pro-investment way to meet some of those needs, and just making sure that we can claim credit for that and let the market do its good work. So that's kind of where we are. That's the end of my formal presentation. Really just wanted to give you a sense of where we've been, what's coming, and is 2015 going to be a breakout year? I have to say yes. In my mind, every year will be a breakout year. I don't know if you're going to see one singular year that you're going to look back and say that was the year, but I have no doubt that 2015 will be the best year for solar. And happy to take any questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Charlie. And again, for the audience, if you have any questions for Charlie, you can send a chat message in the lower right corner of your screen. You can send it to all panelists, or only Charlie and I to see it, or all participants if you want to share your question with the entire audience. So the first question that came in was, can you describe what barriers to solar presently exist and what barriers could be erected through state and local policy that you are trying to prevent?
Good question. The barriers that currently exist, I think, kind of alluded to them before, largely just exist with the complexity of the market and the environment here in the state of Texas, because we have a competitive market, we have investor-owned utilities outside of ERCOT, we have competitive choice within ERCOT, we have munis and co-ops within ERCOT. There is no single market. There are many, many markets, which makes it challenging for developers, can make it challenging for residential and commercial integrators to get in there, because it's complex. We certainly don't want to see costs and fees added at any level. Unfortunately, with the Public Utility Commission at larger scales, the project that I mentioned, planning and system costs with renewable energy, there was some discussion about adding new particular costs just on wind and solar resources in the marketplace, and that did not seem justified and not a good precedent. And thankfully, the other stakeholders that participated in that process, who were not wind and solar developers, but were electricity consumers and other generators, agreed that that's not a change you want to make to the market, because if you're going to discriminate like that, it opens up kind of a can of worms, and that may be problematic for the state. At the local level, we've unfortunately seen in other jurisdictions around the country some moves to add connection fees, customer fees, onerous interconnection fees, permitting barriers. We certainly don't want to see that. We have not, to date, really been directly engaged with local entities. We see local control as positive, and want to let municipal and co-op utilities make choices that suit them, and we want to be a resource. That being said, we don't want to see them head down a path of erecting barriers, and there's certainly kind of a national concern about supporting the grid, and do solar customers pay their fair share. I would certainly argue that they do, but certainly we would not want to see new fees that aren't justified through data. You don't want to discriminate against solar customers as an entire class and say, just because you put a single panel on your roof, therefore you're justified to get this $20 a month surcharge or whatever. You should not add fees that aren't directly related to the specific impact that you're having. And I have not seen any entity take on the analysis at that level that would then put solar on a, you know, if you're going to do that kind of thing, that would put you on a level playing field with, say, somebody who just installs a more efficient air conditioner or efficient windows, or happens to go on vacation for the summer and reduces their electricity load. You know, there are a lot of reasons why you might contribute less to your bill. We don't want to see solar discriminated against.
Okay, great. The next question was from Philip. Do you have any information regarding the rumored 600 megawatt RFP from Austin Energy?
So that is in development. That was approved by the City Council as a part of the Austin Generation Plan, which was excellent to see. Really exciting to see Austin expand its goals and to commit to solar as a real contribution and growing the amount that they have in their portfolio over and above what they currently have in the 150 megawatt recurrent project that's in development. I haven't seen anything specific. That RFP isn't out. The utility and the city are still looking at some analysis around a possible new gas plant that they are investigating, and really doing some final analysis around the portfolio that they have proposed. I would hope to see that RFP come out at some point soon. Haven't seen it yet, and certainly we'll keep an eye out.
Okay, the next question was from Calvin. How has the uncertainty in the federal energy policy limited the development of solar in Texas?
I'd say it's hard to say. You might have to ask specific developers on how they're dealing with it. I think we are coming close enough to the current expiration of the ITC that it's on the radar of folks. I don't know that it is inhibiting yet. Certainty is always a good thing. You know, the ITC is not something that we as an association have a particular stance on. It's not our area. We're focused really on state level activity. I would look to the Solar Energy Industries Association on the specifics on that. You know, our message to policymakers here is kind of, let's keep the focus on what is the state of Texas's to deal with. There will, you know, often be federal regulations, this or that affect the development environment, but there always are those pieces, and those affect all industries, all energy industries, and, you know, in a way, don't get too hung up on some of those pieces outside of Texas. Let's look at what we have in our control to deal with here. So we'll see how that goes.
All right, the next question is from Roy. Do you know the status of the White Camp Solar Project and any other merchant solar projects in Texas?
You know, I haven't seen too much new announced on that. Had seen previously some announcements. I know they have made it further in the full study process than others. I have not heard that they had achieved financing or really broken ground on that. But you know, in a previous edition, I had the full breakdown of all of the projects that are in the queue, but there's, you know, 50, 60 some odd projects, so there's really a lot coming. But I haven't heard anything super recently about that one. But, you know, I hope they are able to move forward.
Okay, next question was, can you estimate a timeline for utility scale interconnection approval, or what the other longest timeline item is for large projects in Texas?
It sounds like, in terms of just the pure development process, what is the timeline? You know, I'm not super familiar. I'd probably need to ping some of my developer member companies on the total time frame. Certainly, it takes a number of months to go through the ERCOT interconnection study process. And then, you know, to some extent, it's just a matter of how quickly a developer can secure land and financing and an off-taker and those pieces. So, you know, there's not much in the way of a published standard timeline for that. Certainly in the experience of the industry, we can move very quickly. You know, once construction is underway and you know, those pieces have been lined up, solar adds capacity very quickly. And because we're inherently modular, they can even energize in sections, and so it's not like you have to wait until 100% completion to start getting some benefit. You can energize sections of a plant if you want to build in stages. So I think timelines are particular to the project, but in general, I'd say you know, they can be fairly quick.
A related question was actually on slide 32. If you could jump back to that.
Sure.
And the question was, at each of these 4 stages of the interconnection pipeline queue that you show, how likely is it that the projects will actually be built? So is it, if the interconnection agreement is executed, does that mean it's 90% of those projects will be built and so on?
You know, I haven't seen any real data that shows kind of historical for each of the individual stages. I would hesitate to give a number. I think it's probably, I don't know. I hesitate to answer that, just I wouldn't want to be off, but I don't know that there is a distinct historical average for those stages in general. There's probably some historical averages for projects that enter the screening on the front end at all. But it's a good question. I'll keep an eye out for that one.
And it's probably true that if there are historical averages, they're more accurate for gas and coal and things that aren't being built as much. The solar history is so small, it might not
exactly.
Be
and that's an important point. I mean, like I said, I don't expect all 6,400 megawatts of these projects to be built, but I feel like it would be a larger fraction than maybe those historical averages, just because they're more recent and they're really starting to get underway, and the interest is there.
The next question was on slide 33. The comment was, it's interesting that ERCOT is projecting almost all new capacity after 2024 will come from solar. Are they expecting even gas to become non-competitive?
I don't want to put words in their mouth. They have a particular model that they run with costs and inputs. And this is what they came out with. It was exciting to see the new solar. I don't have as good a visibility into their projections in the other technology spaces, but that would be a good question to ask for them.
Okay. Next question from Richard. Do you have ideas how to get residential developers on board to embrace residential solar versus blocking it in many new developments?
Yeah, that's something we just want to continue to work with them on and be a good partner and educator with them. We've made really good connections with, their state level associations, and many of our member companies have worked with builders and developers in projects here in the state of Texas and around the country, and so we don't see ourselves at odds with the development community, the residential development community. It's just a matter of building those relationships, conveying a lot of the same information about cost reduction, and positioning solar as an opportunity for them, kind of like what I said with the retail providers, as a distinguishing aspect that a developer could use to stand out to customers. Let's look at solar that way. I think the home building community has often looked at solar and other efficiency things as mandates or things that they're forced to do, and I know that they've had to deal with that at times, and so there's sometimes some hesitancy on the new technology side to not be required to do that. There is no such requirement in the state of Texas, and we're not asking for one. So we want to kind of come in collaboratively and say, hey, this is not about making you do something. It's about best practice sharing from other developers and helping you see the opportunity that solar is. And obviously, the more you can integrate solar on the front end with the design of the home, the orientation, the financing, it makes it cheaper and more effective to do up front than to retrofit years later. So it's a win-win to get the development community, the home building community on board with solar on the front end, and definitely open to those conversations.
Okay, the next question was from Mark. Since the ERCOT coincident system load is still at about 90% of its daily peak at sundown, solar will need to be coupled with technologies that change the load shape. For example, thermal storage cooling on a very large scale. What are your comments on that?
You know, the way I see it, I don't think that solar needs to be coupled. You know, I think there will continue to be a possible benefit to add storage capability and other resources to meet, you know, the needs of the grid at any particular time. I wouldn't frame storage as a uniquely solar enabling technology. So, you know, storage stores electrons, and, you know, any generation would be then stored. And so that may be the case, but there, you know, we're innovating, I think, rapidly on demand response, on energy efficiency, on more, you know, homeowner and commercial building control of energy use, more solar. You could have more solar west facing. You have West Texas solar that generates later in the afternoon and evening. You could, you know, intentionally orient southwest or west to do that on purpose. So I think there's mitigating design and other technology things to do that. And certainly at the scale that solar's at right now, you know, we want to be an increasing part of the electricity mix, but there's not so much solar online that there's some technical requirement that needs to come into play for us to grow. I think we can grow significantly from where we are now just with the infrastructure that we have. And you know, ERCOT is a adaptive and technically savvy organization. They've integrated 10 gigawatts of wind, more than any other state in the country, and so they're very good at you know, being able to work with a number of resources and at different times. So I think it's just an ongoing integration that solar will have happen. I don't think that there is a one particular hurdle in terms of a penetration level or a time that there's some giant leap that needs to be made. I think integration will be an ongoing process, just like with all generating resources.
Yes, I would agree with the experience we've seen in California. The grid can support solar at 10, even 20% before you really have to start talking about storage solutions being required to come into play. And as you said, Charlie, we're not even filling up that 1% of the pie chart yet. So we have a lot of growth to go before we'll run into any technical limitations.
Exactly. Yeah.
Next question was from James. Would you like to comment on barriers to shared or community solar projects in Texas, such as remote metering rules, regulations against selling electricity, and so on?
Yeah, so community solar is an exciting, shared solar, an exciting new model, you know, seen in other parts of the country. Here in the state, in Austin, Austin Energy is developing a project right now to do a 4 megawatt, thereabouts, 4 megawatt installation that will serve customers in a shared manner, and they're still crafting the rules around that. So I think certainly municipal and co-op utilities are empowered to do that, and as far as I know, there's nothing keeping those kinds of projects from happening in the competitive space. It's just kind of like with solar in general, the you know, first projects and the newness of it and the complexity of the regulatory environment. It just takes a while for new models to come about and penetrate. I'm not aware of any particular regulatory or legislative prohibition against that sort of thing. On the metering, you know, I know some of the virtual metering policies have been seen in other places. The state doesn't have a singular approach to metering or customer buyback. I think that's something that's potentially within the purview of municipal and co-op utilities or retail providers as they see fit. And so kind of our approach is we're going to keep an eye out for innovation, keep an eye out for experience, and definitely share that knowledge as soon as it comes about, kind of get it in the hands of others. And my approach is always to make sure that people know what the state of the art is and are prepared to beat it. And I want to see entities always pushing the envelope on what's possible and share that with everybody.
All right, and we've come to the end of our hour, Charlie. We have 5 more questions if you have 5-10 minutes extra to stay online.
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Those. And for the audience, just to let you know, we have come to the end of the hour, so if you have to go to another appointment, you're free to hang up now. We have recorded this session, and we'll continue to record the last few questions as we run over our time. We'll post the recording with the audio and visuals online at principalsolarinstitute.org. And all attendees and all registrants, even if you did not attend, will receive an email tomorrow with a link to that recording. All right, with that, we'll keep on going. The next question was from Michael. What incentives, if any, exist in Texas for non-renewable forms of power generation, and how can we, the Texas solar industry, use these as an argument to level the energy playing field in favor of solar?
It's a good question, and one we're still getting smarter about in terms of really being able to have a level playing field, because that certainly is a value that Texas has and wants to see. Free market, level playing field. From our perspective, we just want to make sure that that's the case. And so, if we identify any particular incentives that we see others are getting, then we want to highlight that. Frankly, from my perspective, it's to some extent it's just the benefit or incentive of being a status quo or entrenched or long-time participant in the market, a long-time player. It's challenging to do new things, to integrate new resources, and so sometimes it's hard to put a point on what the incentive is that an incumbent generator might be getting, but it's just the incentive of being a long-time participant and having the market created and supported and established as if that is the provider, as if that's what energy is, and so that's how we create and design our market. So it's not necessarily a line in the budget that says we gave this many dollars to this generating resource. It's just in the design of rules in the overall market. I'll highlight, as a metaphor for that, ERCOT is going through an analysis of their ancillary services design. So ancillary services being regulation service, frequency service, the things that they provide to maintain grid stability over and above just having megawatts there for power generation. And they acknowledged that the design of how those services were outlined and compensated were largely based just on the generation characteristics of gas and coal plants, because that's what we had. And as new technologies come online and new customer needs are identified, they can look more particularly at what are the needs that we actually have, and what are all of the contributions that various generators can provide, and make sure we compensate them specifically. So, just as an acknowledgement of the market has been designed for the players that exist, and sometimes it's just a matter of making sure that the market can work well with a new contributor like solar, so that we can provide all the benefits that I talked about, because at the end of the day, it's a positive addition for solar to do that.
Next question is from Leandra. What's the main way that you've seen the competitive solar landscape in Texas evolve in the past year, and what are you anticipating moving forward in next year?
Competitive, on the wholesale, obviously, just the number of projects in the queue, I think, has been the single biggest. It's gone from about 2,000 megawatts to 6,400 megawatts in about a year. So just the number of participants, the number of projects, the number of players, I think, has gone up significantly, and certainly those announcements from Recurrent and Berea. On the in the competitive side, I've just seen more companies come back and say that we're starting to sell into non-rebated, non-incentivized territories. We're working with partners that are to see the investment value of hedging their future electricity costs and see solar as a positive economic return. So it's just kind of the green shoots of market development that are what I'm seeing. Certainly kind of third-party ownership continues to be a facilitation for some areas being able to offer financing alternatives to, paying for an entire system up front. I think there's been a lot of innovation on the loan front, being able to really provide lower cost financing to customers. And so I think that'll continue to be a huge driver, just being able to offer customers options for residential and commercial. And, as is the focus everywhere around the country, just reducing soft costs, reducing education costs and customer acquisition, the regulatory burden, permitting, interconnection, just, as the market grows, as we get more throughput, the industry will be more efficient and customers will find solar faster, find solar cheaper. And I think that will happen. That's, one of the main reasons I'm so confident in Texas as a whole and the competitive space. I think that, the peer-to-peer learning happens very quickly. There's been some research at UT from Dr. Varun Rai about, the speed increase that you get. If your neighbor has solar, you are, your time to consider solar drops from about 8 months down to about 4 months. I think the numbers were at, I may be a little off on those, but it basically cuts the time in half, so as more solar happens, more solar will happen.
And where was that study from? That's very interesting.
Yeah, Dr. Varun Rai, RAI at the University of Texas, has done really good research in kind of the dissemination and diffusion of solar, specifically here in Texas, but his research also expands throughout the country and done some really good, exciting work in that area.
Oh, great. Next question is from Sam. Do you agree that Texas commercial and industrial rooftop and distributed generation is lagging relative to residential and utility scale installations? And if so, are there any specific reasons in Texas that this is true?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the pure numbers, C&I is third behind residential and utility scale, and utility scale is kind of the largest by far right now, at about 225 megawatts, residential around 40, commercial industrial around 35. So it's certainly a little bit behind. My sense is that it will just continuously be dynamic, as many of these variables change, from these projects coming online at big scale to new financing, new models that emerge in the competitive market, community solar, all sorts of moving parts. I think that each sector and segment will see kind of fuel added to their market at different times based on new developments. PACE financing, property assessed clean energy financing, is another exciting development that I think will really provide a boost to the commercial side. And so there's that. I think, the financing is an issue on the commercial side as well, just larger systems. And if you have a business that may, be having a hard time deciding whether or not they want to make a larger investment in solar, it may take them a while longer to do that. But, I don't think that there's any inherent barrier keeping commercial and industrial customers from doing solar. I think industrial consumers are some of the most sophisticated. Obviously, they, really energy costs are extremely important to large energy users, and so I think there's going to be some exciting partnerships with solar integration on a variety of fronts on the industrial side. So definitely look for that to get more hot.
And do you know if PACE has been implemented in any local jurisdictions in Texas?
Not yet. The one that I think is closest will be Travis County. I think there's efforts underway to kickstart a program here. That legislation authorized PACE in the last session, 2013, very well supported, bipartisan support. It's a non-incentivized method for facilitating clean energy, energy efficiency, and solar investments. And so now they're just looking at program implementation and really trying to make it easy and seamless for local governments to incorporate that model, and it just takes some pilot efforts. And so I think stakeholders are working with Travis County as one initial group to kind of take the lead on some of that, work with councils of government to do some program administration and make that happen. So I would expect to see, real movement in the next couple of months on program development there.
And just two more questions from Tim. What utility scale RFPs do you see on the horizon besides Austin Energy?
That's a good question. I wish they would call me and tell me when they were going to do them. I don't have, unfortunately, a super close insight. I think the ones that I showed before on the list, I think we'll see those come to fruition, I hope. I don't have unfortunately, any particular new intel to share in terms of what's cooking. I try to keep an eye out. I know Pedernales Electric has really done a lot. They've had some recent. I didn't have that one on the list, but they recently did an RFP for a series of 1 to 2 megawatt scale projects that they could really incorporate within the service territory. And they have big plans. Another entity that's looked at the economics and just decided that solar is a good economic addition to their portfolio, and say they've mapped out a number of program types from member-owned solar to member-sited solar that's administered by PEC to large-scale projects that they just take in under a PPA. And so I think that those sorts of models are going to proliferate, and I want to do everything that we can to make sure that everybody's got that information and can learn from each other. But unfortunately, I don't have a short list of new RFPs that are in the hopper.
All right, and the next question was from Marty. What is the role of concentrating solar energy and thermal energy storage in general, and in particular in connection to coal and gas using conventional plants in hybrid solutions? Mm-hmm. This would be in relation to improving grid stability and nighttime consumption.
Sure. There hasn't been much CSP development here in the state of Texas. We just by design, the Texas Solar Power Association isn't focused on CSP just because it's a different technology, a different kind of model and different needs that they have. And unfortunately, that market just hasn't grown as the photovoltaic industry has. They had some nice projects happen and some earlier momentum, but the extreme cost reduction that PV has seen has really enabled that to take off, and that's where our focus is, and I think where most of the development is. CSP certainly is a positive addition, and with thermal salt storage can provide some of that delayed coming offline ability. There are certainly some pilots with storage and some large plants that have been developed. I don't know if Texas will see a lot of CSP. We have some areas in the extreme west that have that intense direct normal sun that you need for CSP, but at this point I'd say that PV has such a head start. I don't know if CSP will catch up here in Texas, but excited to see new entrants.
Great, and that was our last question. So thank you for staying an extra 15 minutes with us. And if you have any parting comments, Charlie?
Yeah, thanks to everybody for joining. I really appreciate your participation and attention. Thank you to Principal Solar Institute for having me. Feel free to reach out with additional questions for solar industry that you're aware of. Feel free to reach out to me for more information about the association and how to get involved in our activities. And let's go forth and conquer.